Well, hey there, guys. So, most everyone has heard of Ken Burns and his amazing documentary work. And many people have also heard of the Ken Burns effect. And that's what we're going to be working on today. The Ken Burns effect is basically a panning and zooming animation action that is performed in video editing software to create a sense of movement in otherwise still images. So we're going to do two animations today, so let's get moving on that. Okay, so here we are inside Premiere, and what we're going to do is animate two images. One is this Manet work right here, and another one is this photograph from the Civil Rights Movement of protesters marching from Selma to Montgomery. This is a really powerful image. This first one is just going to be a simple, we're probably going to zoom in on this fallen soldier and then do a zoom out to show sort of the greater scene. And this next one, I'd like to create a little bit more sense of movement here, perhaps zoom in on a couple of the characters in here if the resolution is good enough, and then actually zoom out again to show this sort of greater collection of people unified, marching towards their goals, basically. And so here is what that looks like in the finished product. Okay, so what I decided to do is this gentleman and this gentleman behind waving the peace sign, they seemed like very compelling characters to start with. So we're sort of imitating a panning motion of a camera moving from right to left. And then I want to zoom into this other gentleman, this young man, who is also just very compelling looking to me. And so we have this pan that then jumps to a quick pan over to this gentleman, and then we have that sort of continuation of movement, and then we have another sort of quick pan over a few frames that then zooms out to the greater whole and as well continues that overarching movement from the camera from right to left. So that's what we're going to do. Let's get moving. So I just made a sequence for this simple animation that we're going to do first, and this is of this image. And what we want to do is basically start off with a close-up shot of this fallen soldier and then animate to zoom out a bit to show what is going on around him, basically. And so many times folks will actually start at the end point of where their animation is and then work to the front. Sometimes it's easier for folks to think that way. And we're going to do that in this instance. So I'm going to select on Effects Controls. And this is actually where I want this to end up. And notice that my playhead is at the end of the image duration. So I'm just going to add a couple keyframes right here. Cool. And I'm going to go back to the beginning. And now is when I'm going to zoom in quite a bit to sort of show the desperation of the scene, I guess, draw some emotionality. And notice how once we do that, it actually creates keyframes for us right here. So let's take a look at this. It's looking good. One other thing that we can do right here is if you right click on a keyframe, you can change the sort of the form of the line that is being used. A linear is just a very straight linear animation. Bezier will have some curves to it, and ease in and ease out will actually slow the beginning and end of each animation. So if we do that let's do that for all of them. Just select them all as ease in, and let's see how that feels. And see how it slows towards the end of the animation. Which I think works really well in this case. So this is all set. So now let's move on to the more complex animation. Okay, so we are ready for our second animation, which is going to be a little bit more complex. So I'm just going to create a sequence for clarity purposes, another sequence rather. I'm going to call this sequence underscore civil rights. Okay, the image that we are going to be working with is this one right here. And let's drag this into the timeline and adjust the duration. I want this to be about 10 seconds long. Let's go over to the effects controls. And now we're ready. We can toggle on position and scale to create our first keyframes. And now we really want to crank in the scale to where this gentleman is over here. The path of this overarching animation is going to zoom in very closely to this gentleman, then to this gentleman, and then we're going to have an animation that widens the shot, all the while continuing this sort of continuous movement from the camera from right to left, which will have an effect of making the subjects in the shot move from left to right. So we're just going to zoom in to where we want this first gentleman to be positioned. Just go right around 550. Great. And there's not enough earth here, so I'm going to just lower this a tiny bit. Oops, wrong way. Right around 500 seems good. Okay, so this is our first point, and this first animation is going to go slowly for about 3 seconds. So I'm just going to move the playhead 3 seconds into the timeline. Looking good. And now we're going to move to the second point of our first animation. About negative 425. This is looking good. I'm just going to punch in a keyframe down here just so I keep track of things, even though we're not adjusting the scale. And it's a nice, gentle left to right movement of our subjects. All right, so now we're ready to make our next animation point. And this animation is going to be quick. It's going to be animating from this gentleman to this gentleman. We can see his left leg right here. That's going to happen very quickly, probably over the course of like 8 to 10 frames. So let's just make sure we're selected on top of the keyframe, and then let's move 8 frames to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Great. And now let's go to our next point. Looking good. And I'm elevating this a little bit. Relatively speaking, this gentleman is much higher in the canvas than this gentleman, so I'm just giving him a little headroom. Okay, so now let's see how this feels. Looks great, cool. So now just moving on. So now we're going to create another sort of slow 3 second pan that's also going to zoom out a little bit, and it's just going to show us a wider glimpse of the scene. So I'm going to move 3 seconds into the timeline to right around 6:08, or 6 seconds and 8 frames, or 6 seconds and 10 frames. That sounds fine. And let's go to that point. Let's go to about 550. And let's see how this feels. See how it continues nice and smoothly in this overarching sort of right to left motion. I did notice something a little funny right here. If we just play this back one more time. See how it sort of elevates a little bit? There are some sort of automatic controls that are sometimes applied, and they have to do with how the motion path is is calculated on the part of Premiere. I'm trying to keep this as linear as possible without any Beziers or anything like that, so I'm just going to make sure all of my keyframes are set to linear. Definitely play around with this because it can offer a pretty cool effect. The Bezier spatial interpolation is really pretty awesome. Linear, it's linear. Okay, spatial interpretation is auto Bezier, so I'm going to switch that to linear. Hopefully that fixes that. It didn't seem like it fixed it. Interesting. Okay, this is at auto Bezier as well. Switch that back to linear. Okay, I think we're good. So keep an eye out for any jitteriness like that, and then just decide whether that's something you want. If it's not something you want, then you can adjust your spatial interpolation, and then you can affect that. Let's play that and see if that has resolved the issue. Cool. I think we're looking good. Okay. So in this next one, this is going to be a relatively quick animation as well. We're going to do about a half-second animation that's going to zoom out much wider on this wonderful scene, and it's going to give a greater glimpse into all the other people that are in this photo. So I'm going to move about 15 frames. How about 705? That seems fine. Let's change this. So we're continuing this right to left motion, so I'm increasing the X value. So right about there. And then I'm going to pull back quite a bit on the scale, which will make more sense. And so look at that, that's much better. All right, let's play this back and see how this feels from the beginning. Nice, continuous, smooth movement, great. Okay, it was decent. I think that this animation just went too slow for me. Yeah, I want that to happen faster. So I'm just gonna move that, not sure exactly how many frames it is, but let's see how that feels. I actually like that. Okay, and as you might have guessed, we're gonna have a gentle continuation of this animation going for the next 3 seconds roughly, or until our clip runs out, which is right at 10 seconds and 3 frames. And hit the arrow back to get our last frame. And then we're gonna adjust this a little bit further. We're gonna continue this sort of right to left movement by going higher on the x-axis. And then maybe continue elevating this just a tad. And then zooming out just a tiny bit. This is at 240 currently, so we're going to zoom out to 230 and see how that feels. Okay, let's check this out from beginning to end. Okay, so that is that.